The power of PopTech to bring people together, don't ever underestimate it, because Thomas has just agreed to come back to the Pentagon with me to streamline our defense acquisition process.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to have to talk fast. We have too much to say. So I want to thank PopTech for having me. I want to thank the Department of Defense for allowing me to accept the gracious invitation. And with that, I promised our ethics officer that I would provide this disclaimer. The concepts contained in this document, the national strategic narrative of those are Mykleby and myself alone. They do not reflect the official views of the United States government, the Department of Defense, the United States Navy, the United States Marine Corps.
Well, now that I'm retired, yeah, this is all me, so we'll go. So.
Or our former boss, Admiral Mullen, who's rolling his eyes right now, online probably. So I was looking through the agenda. I've been here since Wednesday. I was looking through the agenda, and I noticed that there's a lot of re's. There's restart and reform. And reshape and rebalance and resilience. A lot of re's. Too many re's. My sense is that particularly my generation of Americans tend to view the future as an unfamiliar and crowded street, down which we are attempting to navigate a very large gas-guzzling vehicle. And we are driving only by looking in the rearview mirror, continuously striking parked cars and swearing at all the reckless drivers. So I've been with Admiral Mullen, or I had, as he just retired, but I've been with him for 6 of the last 7 years, all in the same capacity, which is the nonlinear connector of dots who he can ignore, but say that he actually had someone on his staff who was a nonlinear connector of dots. So it was in that capacity in 2009 that I had written a paper that applied the theories of complex and adaptive systems to the unique global phenomenon of the rise of violent extremism. Admiral Mullen was quite taken with the paper. He shared it with Secretary Gates, and I get invited to lunch with Secretary of Defense. This was July of 2009. It's pretty cool. So I got to go up, and Admiral Mullen accompanied me, of course. And we sat down with Secretary Gates, who's an incredibly experienced and wise individual, I might add. And he Socratically walked me through this document. Well, Admiral Mullen listened. This is for an hour. And I didn't eat a lot. I just answered questions. And at the end of the hour, I said, sir, you know, I really only wrote that paper to demonstrate what a derivative strategy would look like if we had a national strategy. And Admiral Mullen gave this nervous kind of laugh. and he said, sir, I think what Wayne's trying to tell you is that we don't have a grand strategy. So Secretary Gates said, well, what'd you have in mind? And I said, well, I don't know, sir. Maybe something focused a little more on opportunity than on risk and threat. Well, he didn't bite. He was interested in the other paper I had written, and I did do a follow-up to that. But as we left his office, we hit the passageway out of the Secretary's office. And Admiral Mullen turns to me and he says, I say we just press. So I said, on. And he said, you just go write a grand strategy and give it to me. So I said, yes, sir, came downstairs. Our offices are right below, one deck below. And I called Puck, who was then at SOCOM as a colonel, fighter pilot colonel in the Marines in strategy and policy at Special Operations Command. We knew each other previously. We were both kind of the same mind. And I said, hey Puck, why don't you come up here and help me write a grand strategy for the nation? That's an absolute true story, by the way. So when you work for the chairman, you can do crazy things. And I wound up getting myself an office on the E-ring with a window of the Jefferson Memorial Washington Monument. I was 3 doors down from Admiral Mullen. For 2.5 years, I don't think he ever knew I was in that office. And I got orders for Puck to come up and help me.
Yeah, so imagine my surprise being blissfully happy in Happyville down at the Special Ops Command in Tampa. And then in my 28 years in uniform, I never, ever wanted to be in the Pentagon. And thanks, Wayne. That's how I got to end up my career in the Pentagon. But it's all good. But yeah, we got up there. And so grand strategy, this is how stupid we were. We go, how long do you think it would take? Maybe 2 months. Let's go with 4 months to just play it safe. Well, 2 years later, I was still there. But so how do we get started with it? We said, well, how hard can it be? What could possibly go wrong? So we end up at the Pentagon. We're looking out the window. And I mean, how does like a mouth-breathing sailor and a nose-picking Marine go about grand strategy for the nation? So we you know, I guess just because we're weirdos, we said, well, let's start with Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. That ought to work. And we did. And it was just a basic observation. You know, maybe it's an overused analogy, but it worked for us, is that we noticed that everything that we do is, you know, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You know, you can measure the position or the momentum of a particle. You can't measure both at the same time. Well, guess what? We always choose to measure the position. And what a stupid thing that is. Because the position of the particle is based on history. At best, it's here and now. But that's what we do. We put all this process, all this analysis, we focus on where we are right now. And oh, by the way, we just have legions, gazillion. We've got strategies a go-go. We just have strategies. We've got a national security strategy. We have a national defense strategy, national military strategy. We have a national health security strategy. We even have a series of strategies on national bike safety. I mean, holy cow, we got strategies coming out the wazoo, and none of them say anything. They're all a bunch of wish lists that never really get down to the bottom line. Okay, what are we going to do? We can't prioritize. We don't know where the hell we're going. So we said, we're not going to do that. Because we're not going to focus on the position. We're going to focus on the momentum of the particle. We're going to focus on the trajectory of our nation. We're going to talk about where we are right now, with eyes wide open, with intellectual and emotional honesty, and say, where do we want to go? We want to talk beyond threat and risk. We wanted to talk about opportunities. We wanted to get off this masochistically nostalgic view to the past and get to an opportunities-based, and dare I say it, hopeful place into the future. That's where we started.
So we decided, well, how do you capture what's important to the nation? You know, what do you focus on? Well, it came down, I'm Catholic, I wanted 3, we could only come up with 2. So we came up with prosperity and security, because prosperity and security are wholly interdependent. You can't have one without the other. So we guess that's generally what we're after as Americans. We're after the sustainability of our enduring national interest of prosperity and security. But truthfully, we can't just go rape and pillage to achieve prosperity and security. We have values that not only constrain us, but characterize, but empower us, and characterize us as Americans, values that have stood with us since the founding of our market society and our republic. So we decided to found our strategy on the pursuit of the sustainability of our enduring national interests of prosperity and security, underpinned, empowered, and constrained by our values. And we realized that we had to pursue that in a completely different strategic environment. We've been through a civilizational epic that we probably aren't even capable of recognizing now in the information age. Every bit as impactful as the age of enlightenment this has been. So we now live in an uncertain and an interdependent environment in which there's strength in leveraging interdependencies. So, and we also saw hope in uncertainty. We didn't focus on the fear and threat. So that was the direction we decided to take this.
Yeah, and so, you know, Wayne talked about the interdependencies that exist in the world. It really sounded a lot like an ecology. And that's what we started talking. We started talking about a strategic ecology, not the strategic environment and you know, the threats and the risks of your near-peer competitors or any of that kind of crap. We just started talking about strategic ecology and how do you thrive as an organism. And we really started looking at where are we now. You know, right now we exist in a construct, not only mentally, but also organizationally, into a construct of containment. Anne-Marie just got talking about maybe a different way we ought to go, and I agree with her. The containment aspect of it, though, is, you know, National Security Act 1947, that time, in that period, we had containment as a concept coming out of Kennan, strategic concept. NSA 47 creates a strategic construct. They seem to converge out of design, or just by happenstance, doesn't matter, it seemed to work. But we're still trapped there. We're trapped there cognitively, we're trapped there functionally. And by the way, when we get confused, because we're so focused on the position of the particle, it's like we're playing Mr. Potato Head. You know, Mr. Potato Head's all dressed up, but guess what? We ran out of little holes for him, so we started drilling holes in them. So now we got eyeballs on our ass, we got feet on our head, we're insane. So we decided to move to a new concept, an ecological concept, truly of sustainability, that sustainability becoming our national strategic.
And truthfully, the epiphany we had was that coming out of World War II, it was just unavoidable. We were empowered as Americans. So we came out with the strongest economy. Bretton Woods demonstrated that. We were the reserve economy for the international order, arguably the strongest political system, the strongest military. We just had it all. So we thought that we could manipulate enough variables that we could contain the spread of global communism. That was a strategy of control. Truthfully, the epiphany we had is that our strategic environment isn't a closed system. Closed systems, according to the second law of thermodynamics, lead to entropy. Our environment, our strategic environment, is demonstrated now in this interconnected age we live in, is an open system in which you seek dynamic equilibrium, sustainability. So basically, we were arguing that containment needs to move towards sustainability, from the theories of control to theories of credible influence, from power and force to strength, and not just military strength, but strength of the economy, strength of the citizenship, moral strength, strength that is derived from our values that characterize us as Americans and have become global in nature, listening to Hayat and Shaima earlier. So that was the direction we knew we had to drive this thing, and what we realized was, finally, look, we're really not capable of writing a grand strategy. But that's not what's needed. What Americans needed was a context. They needed the story. They needed a national strategic narrative, something that helps us understand in a non-political manner who we are as Americans and where we're going in the 21st century.
So again, sustainability as a national strategic imperative. It sounds cool, but what do you really do with it? Well, Wayne already talked about it. What if our primary, our enduring national interests are prosperity and security? Well, if you look at the ecological definition of sustainability, it's an organism's ability to remain diverse and productive over time. Pretty interesting, I guess. But, so I had to break that apart. If you look at the diverse aspect, I know we're supposed to be talking about resilience. Resilience is important. Organisms have to be diverse. They have to have depth. There's a reason why we've got 2 arms. Yeah, I'm trying to expand out. 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 eyes. So you can take a hit and keep on going. It's about taking a gut punch. You got to be resilient. But if all we are about is just about resilience, well, then guess what? The concept of resilience is going to get pirated. It's going to get hijacked by all the paranoiacs that live in our government, that live in our media, that unfortunately now in our citizenry, that we have to protect against everything, that we're going to hold our Jell-O really tight. Well, as a little kid, I knew that if I held my Jell-O, if I started squeezing tighter, squish through my fingers. So I could, I started holding my Jell-O a little bit looser, We just got to hold our Jell-O looser. So the concept of resilience is absolutely critical. It's critical to any organisms, but we got to remember we got to talk about productivity. We got to talk about growth, and it's not about quantitative growth. It's about qualitative growth. It's not about how much, it's about how. It's about how we are going to be as a nation, as a people, in an interdependent global ecology. And this is the requirement of citizens. We have right now a disturbing trend line that we just want to be residents. Well, residents pay rent. Residents, that's what they do. They consider their commitment complete. Well, if you've ever read the social contract, Rousseau goes off about that little point. He says that if all you're going to do is pay with your purse, well, guess what? You're not a citizen. You're not a citizen at all. And the difference, the mileage between being a resident and being a citizen, I can't tell you how far that is. A citizen commits some blood and sweat equity to where he is. A citizen isn't going to fall to ideology and demand divisive ultimatums. A citizen is going to demand purposeful participation. A citizen is going to commit him or herself to the future of their children.
And it can't just be those of us who are sworn to support and defend the Constitution. It's all of you. We are proud of what we do. We're proud that you're proud of what we do. We can only reflect the best values that you represent. That's all we are here to do. And so you need to take the lead. I'd like to have a little yellow circle thing on the back of my thing that says, happy to support the American citizen. That's the car I want to drive. So we need to think about that. The other thing is that I said this was much more about evolution than entropy. So what we realized we need to do is competition drives strength. I just read Origin of Species by Charles Darwin. So the truth is that only through competition do we make ourselves stronger, and through natural selection do we evolve as a species. And that's where we are. So America somehow became competition averse a few years ago for whatever reason. And we've noticed that we need to reinvigorate our competitiveness and our understanding of what competition truly means.
So, and the competition is an interesting word. Because I'm a dork and Wayne's sick of hearing me saying that, that's why I'm saying it, because it bugs him. Is competition, competitor. Well, if you do that, I'm illogical, just kind of break that thing apart. The word comes from Latin, competare. What does competare mean? Competare means to strive together. It doesn't mean, okay, I'm going to run a 100-yard dash or a 100-meter dash or whatever, and bang, the starting pistol goes, and I'm going to, because I just became I'm lazy, I didn't train, I'm going to trip the guy next to me, and then I'm going to skip my way to the finish line. That's not competition. Competition is that I'm going to bring my best game, you bring your best game, and in the process of competing, we both win. And oh, by the way, if you take this analogy further to the Greek concept of competition, was that the best possible athlete, the guy I train against, is going to be the guy I actually run in they didn't have the metric system, but it was whatever, the 100-meter dash. But I mean, the two athletes come up to the line, they run, they're the best possible athletes, and oh, by the way, not only is it a win-win, but because it's a cultural event, people come around and look, it's a win-win-win. That's how we got to view competition. Competition isn't a zero-sum game, not in a deeply interdependent world.
So how do you regain that when you're 33rd among nations in science education, you're 24th in math, you're 8th in innovation dominance now, that's what we are. So the bottom line is, what we decided was we needed to reprioritize our national resources and focus them on the strength of converging interests and interdependencies and reinvigorating competitiveness and pursuing sustainable path to prosperity and security based on our values. So we said, well, look, where does that start? It starts with education. So the primary investment priority for our nation should be education, so that we are developing the leaders and the thought leaders of the next century who can take us into the challenges we face in this generation, which aren't from sovereign states as much as they are from the fact that we have finite resources, 9 billion people by the middle of this century, and we have to find a sustainable way for us all to thrive. That's number one. So education, first priority. Second priority, security is about a lot more than, as Puck said, hunkering down and protecting what you got. So it's about a lot more than defense. Security is about the economy, and it's about health care, and it's about taking care of yourself. It's about freedom from oppression and freedom from prosecution and freedom from hateful ideologies, freedom from the spread of disease. No single department owns that. No part of the government owns that. We all own that. And that needs to be approached as a second priority nationally. The third thing that we identified has to be the development of and the access to renewable resources. This goes from renewable sources of energy. We are in a new era. We need to get over fossil fuels and move on to the next era for a sustainable energy for the planet and let our economy thrive as we become leaders for the world to do that. It also has everything to do with soil erosion and water management and food security, because that's the other imperative that we need to face in this generation.
And so what does that all mean? Do you want to talk about the National Prosperity and Security Act?
I do. Okay, so what we said at the end of the paper was, so how do you get there? Well, we said, well, what we need, we are an inflection point in history, just as George Kennan was facing the threat from global communism. We're facing the opportunity of a new epic for civilization. Honestly believe that. So the sense is, how do you get there? Well, what we don't need the mechanisms that were put in place for our government to face off against the spread of global communism. We need the mechanisms to pursue the strategy that we're talking about. So we're calling it a National Prosperity and Security Act. And it creates more dynamism, more flexibility, not only between elements of the government, departments of the government, but between the public and private sector, so that we can take a whole nation, a citizenry approach to this kind of sustainable strategy.
And that's key. And a couple of things. First of all, if you remember, everyone quotes Eisenhower's farewell address, 1961, about the military-industrial complex. He talked a bit about that. It was part of his point. But everyone forgets that he offered the solution, an enduring solution for our nation. He said, what it's going to take is a knowledgeable and well-informed citizenry. Well, right now, we are neither knowledgeable nor are we well-informed. We have gone the way of ideology. We have these divisive ideologies, and it's a false faith. It's a false faith with these divisive ultimatums. We need to start converging, and that's the point of what we're trying to say. This was two apolitical guys, and God, I'm still apolitical. But by conviction, by profession, we are demanded as our duty to be apolitical. So this isn't in the political sphere. This is just plain frickin' common sense. Look out the window.
And what, one thing that I've got to say, and then I'm going to turn this over to Puck. I came to this conclusion. It was during the throes of the debt crisis, and I was watching all that was happening. I lived in Washington, and I realized that somehow we've developed institutional autism. That's what I've defined it as. Because many times autistic individuals, high or low autism, and it varies, characteristics vary, they suffer from an inability to recognize the impact their actions have outside their cognitive realm. They have difficulty communicating. They are unwilling to accept change. They do repetitive and compulsive behavior and they are incapable of recognizing or dealing with uncertainty. Does that sound familiar to anyone here? And do you know why? It's because we've disconnected the left and right hemispheres of our brain. We've disconnected institutionally our creative, the right side of our brain, our nonlinear creative side from the left side, our technological and our linguistics processing side. We've separated those two, and we're not allowing innovation to drive the nation forward where we need to go in this century.
And so just to close this out, I mean, I think it would serve us all well to remember what our Navajo friends is. You can't get to a good place in a bad way. You can't. You know, we just got to look in the stinking mirror and say, how are we? Well, we're in a little bit of a bad way, but it's okay. We can fix it. I mean, we're Americans. We do have the grit. We do have the capability if we would just focus and we converge on these ideas. And that's what Wayne and I tried to do with this narrative. All we were offering was a philosophy. Again, philosophy, a love of wisdom. A love of wisdom, a philosophy that will transcend the ideologies that are tearing us apart today, but also an ideology, or I'm sorry, a philosophy that will inform our technology, our skill and knowledge. That's what we need. That's what we're talking about, because at the end of the day, we have got to find the good way to get to our good place.
www.wilsoncenter.org is where that's posted. I didn't mention that. Thank you very much.
Thanks.